Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Take on Me by Stacy Claflin. Narrated by Rachel Dulude. Trapped. Everything had been quiet so long. Too long. Something wasn't right. It had to be a trick. But even if it was, Ayla needed to try and make an escape. She tugged on both sides of the blindfold. It was not only super tight, but it wouldn't even budge. It had been glued to her hair and scalp. She'd have to get away with it on. Ayla tried to pull the fabric up and then down, but it was so tight, scratchy. It hurt, but she'd gotten used to it. Kind of. She definitely wanted it off, but that would have to wait, especially if she could leave. She felt around the shag carpet. Her finger bumped the dinner plate, and the fork on it made a really loud noise. Ayla held her breath and froze in place. Waited. Nobody came. She released her breath and felt around again. This time, not so rushed. Part of the carpet was soggy, but she didn't want to think about why. He'd made her stay in the room for so long and hadn't let her leave for anything. Fresh air would be so nice. She held on to that thought as she felt around some more. Just carpet. The shaggy kind like her grandparents had had when she and her parents had traveled on a plane to visit their house, back when Grams and Pop-Pop were still alive. Ayla pushed aside thoughts of them. It usually made her heart hurt, thinking about never seeing them again, and now it was so much worse. Tears stung her eyes, and she blinked them away as best she could with the tight fabric. She crawled on her hands and knees, breathing heavily. Her left knee ached, but it was nothing compared to her throbbing cheekbone and mouth, or her arms from where she'd been shoved into the small trunk of that car. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Goosebumps formed, hurting where she had cuts and bruises. Was her mom okay? The last time she'd seen her had been in that trunk. Well, not seen. They'd already been blindfolded, but she'd been there. Mom had held her close and whispered for her to stay strong, said not to give up. If she didn't give up, she'd survive. The words were supposed to have helped, but they only scared her. Could she be strong? How long would she have to keep going without giving up? Mom kept saying that over and over during the bumpy ride, that and how much she loved Ayla. She bumped into a wall and pulled herself from her thoughts. No, it wasn't a wall. She pressed her palm on it. It felt like a door. Her heart pounded as she reached up, higher. A knob. Cold metal. And it jiggled. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Ayla waited for it to stop. She needed her ears more than ever because of the blindfold. Once she could hear again, she twisted the knob, slowly. Once it went as far as it would go, she paused. Would the door open? If it did, would she find freedom? Or something worse than her current situation? That wasn't likely. Before, she'd thought Shayna telling everyone she still played with dolls was the most horrifying experience, but she'd been wrong. So very wrong. She hesitated, didn't want to get beat up again, but it was a risk she had to take. Mom's words ran through her mind. Ayla needed to be brave for both of them. What if her mom needed help? Who was she kidding? Of course Mom needed help. Wherever she was, they both did. They'd been separated since being yanked out of the trunk. She shuddered at the thought, then took a deep breath. They would escape. Ayla would make sure of that. Holding her breath, she pulled on the knob. The door moved. It actually opened. She cocked her head and listened. Her pounding heart made it hard to hear anything, but she was sure everything else was silent. Other than her wild heartbeats, there were no other sounds, nothing. What she wouldn't give to see. But there was no removing the fabric, not without scissors. Maybe not without cutting her hair. She loved her hair, but it was a small price to pay for freedom. Everything else had changed. Why not her hair? As stupid as it sounded, thinking about a haircut gave her something to focus on, something after this nightmare. Ayla pressed her palms on the doorframe and slid them out to the wall. Listened for anything. Expected someone to scream at her, knock her to the ground. Everything was still quiet. Everything except the sounds of her breathing and the slight movements of her palms against the bumpy wall. She wanted to call out for her mom, but didn't dare. Not when it could alert him of her whereabouts. Her mouth dried at the thought. She silently begged God to keep him away, to let her escape and find help. Ayla groped the wall, creeping along. The paint was scratchy, like it was chipped, or like something had hit it a lot. She shuddered, hoping other people hadn't been forced to stay in the house like her and her mom. Bump. She froze in place, pressed herself against the wall. What had made that noise? Bump, thump. The noises were muffled, like they were in a room behind a closed door. Were they Mom? Or were they him? Her body tensed at the second thought. She couldn't risk heading toward the sounds. Mom would want her to get away, to find help. Police or firefighters could break down the doors and save her. Ayla was weak, starved and beaten. Her sore knee gave her a slight limp. She was in no shape to try and fight off a grown man. Even if she was at her strongest, she couldn't beat him. Nothing else sounded, no more bumps, no more thumps. They'd been behind her, or at least they'd sounded that way. She kept going in the direction she was already headed. Her fingers came to a protrusion in the wall. It was ridged and went up and down. A doorframe. She stepped around it, careful not to brush her hands against the door itself. If someone was inside, they might hear her, and her knees nearly gave out at the thought. Ayla found the other side of the frame, then continued down the hall, feeling the wall as she crept along. Thump. The noise sounded farther away this time. Relief washed through her. With her sight useless, she was sure her hearing was better. She was more aware of the direction and distance of the noises. Or maybe it was only her imagination. Could her other senses take over so quickly? She wasn't sure how long it had been since the blindfold had been forced on her. Could have been 5 days or even a week. It was so hard to tell how much time went by when blindfolded. She continued down the hall, listening. The only sounds she heard were her fingertips along the wall and now her bare feet along the carpeting. She hadn't noticed that before. It was more obvious now. Hopefully he couldn't hear any of it. If she was going to get away, she had to bank on that. Ayla came to another door frame. She moved past it quickly and soon came to a corner. She felt the wall extra carefully. It was just as bumpy and chipped as the other one had been. Her hip bumped into something. It wobbled, made noises like things tipping. She reached for it. Some sort of end table, maybe. Her arm brushed against something long and skinny. A vase? Maybe a thin lamp. Crash, tinkle, crack. Blood drained from her body. Her heart leaped into her throat. There was no way that could go unnoticed. She stepped over the mess, feeling along the wall. Shouting sounded. It was muffled, but it was him. She could never forget that voice. Another door. Ayla found the knob and turned. She leaped into the room and closed the door, careful not to make a noise. Her heart thundered worse than before. She felt around. This room was full of stuff. Something long and stiff, covered in fabric, leaned against the wall. A mattress? Footsteps thundered out in the hallway. More shouting. Ayla moved around the mattress and pressed herself against the wall. A pile of clothes or blankets were next to the wall. She slid down to sitting and pulled them over her. They smelled like a mix of cigarette smoke and beer. She gagged, but held as still as possible. The doorknob jiggled. Crash! The door banged into something. "Are you in here, brat?" Ayla's breathing stopped. "Where are you?" He thunder-stomped around. She prepared herself for the worst, for him yanking off her covers and finding her, making her pay for trying to get away, for knocking over the table. "You think you can get away from me?" His footsteps came closer. Her hands shook. Stomach lurched. Tears soaked into the blindfold, but she held her body still, made sure he didn't see the pile of clothes or blankets moving. "You'd better come to me, because if I find you, you're going to pay. Do you hear me? I'll do things to you that you never thought possible. Come out, you stupid child." Ayla swallowed and willed herself to remain motionless, held her breath, squeezed her eyes shut as the stream of tears poured out. He thunder-stomped around some more, calling her things she'd never heard before but could tell were horrible insults. Then his footsteps moved toward the door, which slammed shut. Ayla didn't budge. What if the slamming door was a trick? He could be waiting in the room, waiting for her to come out. She struggled to breathe without making a noise. Her breaths were coming out in gasps, and she was crying even harder now. He shouted again. It was muffled, out in the hall. Her entire body relaxed. She wasn't safe yet, but at least he was gone from the room. She moved the blankets from her face and took in a big gulp of fresh air, or at least fresher air. It was stale and gross like the rest of the house, but better than the smoke beer odor. Another door slammed shut out in the hall, his yelling farther away. Ayla's whole body went limp with relief. Then cries sounded. Mom. He was making her pay for what Ayla did. Her lips trembled and even more tears came, making her face hot. Mom shrieked and howled. Ayla shuddered. She never should have tried to get away, but it was too late, and he was distracted. She had to get out now, before he did something even worse to Mom. Ayla pushed off the covers and forced herself to her feet. Mom was still hollering, her tone higher. "I'm so sorry," Ayla whispered. "I'll send for help." She felt around the mattress and found the door, opened it, listened. Mom wailed, and he yelled. Crash! Ayla jolted, then stepped into the hall. Something sharp dug into her foot. She winced, but managed not to cry out, then stepped around the debris and raced as fast as she could, feeling her way along the wall. The shouts and cries continued. She came to another door. This one had a deadbolt. That meant it would lead outside, to freedom. She could find someone to help Mom. All she needed to do was get out of there. She flipped the deadbolt. It clicked. Her heart pounded harder. She fumbled with the knob. It had a twisty lock. She released it, then twisted the knob, pulled on the door. And it opened. Ayla stepped outside and gulped in fresh air. Then she closed the door behind her and took another step. She stumbled down a stair, then another, crashed onto the ground. The air knocked out from her lungs. She scrambled to her feet, trying to breathe. Dirt and tiny stones stuck to her arms. Twigs dug into her feet. Howl! Ayla turned her head, listened. An owl hooted overhead. Something howled again. She yanked on the blindfold. The stupid thing still wouldn't budge. Something crashed inside the house. Ayla ran. Call. Captain Nick Fleshman took a deep breath as he stared at the shaking envelope in his hand. Actually, it was his hand shaking. He'd put this moment off long enough, found every excuse in the book, and made up some really lame ones to boot. But it wasn't doing anyone any good. He needed to know the information held inside. More importantly, if it was bad news, so did Parker. If the paper inside revealed everything was fine, then his son would never even have any clue the question of his paternity had come up. Yet it had. And here Nick sat in his office on his lunch break, staring at an envelope he knew by heart at this point. Maybe this was a bad idea. Everything had been going just fine until Corinne brought up the fact that Parker's paternity was questionable. Okay, things hadn't been fine, but at least Nick had his family. The rest of the world had been crumbling, but at least he had his kids. Technically, he still had them. With Corinne and Dave both in jail, and with Nick as Parker's legal parent, custody wouldn't change. Nick would remain Parker's dad no matter what genetics said. He'd raised him, and he definitely loved him as much as his daughters, and no piece of paper could change that. Nothing could change the way he felt about his son. His son, no matter what. Nick drew in another deep breath. All these thoughts were nothing more than putting off the inevitable. He dug out his letter opener from the middle drawer of his desk. The moment of truth. The results wouldn't change anything, or they could change everything. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. His cell phone buzzed in his pocket. Nick dropped the envelope. It floated on top of a stack of papers on his desk. He set down the letter opener and pulled out his phone. Genevieve. His whole body relaxed, seeing her beautiful picture on the screen. He cleared his throat as he accepted the call. "How are you?" "Are you okay? You sound stressed." There was no hiding anything from his fiancée. "I was about to open the envelope." "Right now?" she exclaimed. "Probably bad timing, huh? I should do this at home, on a weekend when I have plenty of time to deal with the bad news." "If it is bad news. But there'll never be a perfect time, and you're only going to feel worse the longer you put it off. Do you want me to open it for you this evening? Then I can break it to you whichever way it goes." "I appreciate it, G. Really, I do, but I need to do this myself." "If you want, I can take the kids for the night so you have the house to yourself." Nick stared at the envelope and sighed. "That's sweet of you. It really is. But Parker has a study group, and Ava's going out with her friends. That just leaves Hannah." "And Tinsley would love to spend the evening with her. It's perfect. I can pick up Hannah from your parents' house after work. That's where she'll be after school, right?" "Yes, but..." "But nothing. It's settled. Put the results out of your mind for now, okay? Tonight's your night. If you want me there after, I'll bring the girls over. We can play with them or just sit quietly while they're outside." Nick's heart warmed. "You make it so hard to say no." "Everything's going to be fine, Nikki. I promise." That was a nickname he typically hated, but there was something about the way it rolled off her tongue that made him smile. "I hope you're right." "Genetics aren't what make a parent. All the years and love you've invested in him, that's what makes you his dad. If the genetics are there, all the better, but if not, you two will work through it." He tapped his finger on the desk. "Thanks, G." "Well, I'd better get to work. I just wanted to hear your voice before I dig into my stack of paperwork." "Thanks for calling." "I love you."
"And I love you."
He ended the call and glanced at the time. 10 more minutes until his lunch break ended. He eyed the envelope. 10 minutes was more than he needed to break the seal and check the results. His desk phone rang. Maybe it was a sign to forget about the envelope for the time being. He picked up the receiver.
"Fleshman. Captain Fleshman, this is Sergeant Hoffman in Spokane."
Nick racked his mind, unable to think of a case clear across the state. Must be something new.
"What can I do for you?" "You have an Officer Alex Mercer on your force, don't you?"
Nick's stomach twisted. Alex was his best friend and one of the precinct's newest officers. He'd gotten himself into a lot of trouble in the days before becoming an officer of the law, but had done a complete 180. The last thing they needed was an old problem derailing all his progress.
I do. How can I help?
The sergeant cleared his throat.
We have an unusual case involving a victimized child. She can't remember anything about her ordeal, nor can she tell us who she is or who her family is, other than she has an uncle, Alex Mercer.
Uncle? Nick scratched his head. At least Alex wasn't in trouble, but this made no sense.
That's what the girl says. I looked him up and showed her a picture I found of him online. She confirmed your officer is her uncle. Now I'm confused. His only sister has a baby boy, no other children. I'm going to email over a picture of our girl. Can you ask Officer Mercer to have a look? They might know each other some other way. She's highly traumatized, and like I said, can't even tell us who she is. He's out on lunch. I'll speak with him the moment he returns. I'd appreciate that.
They exchanged contact information, and almost as soon as the call ended, Sergeant Hoffman's email came in. Nick opened it, curious to see if he knew the girl. His stomach twisted at the sight of her picture. No matter how long he'd been on the force, it never got easier seeing a child hurting. The girl looked to be about 12 years old. She sat in a hospital bed covered in bandages, stitches, and bruises. Her lower lip and one eye were swollen. One thing was certain. Nick didn't recognize her. That left a burning question. How did the traumatized girl across the state know Alex? News. Alex Mercer sipped his peppermint mocha as he sat at his desk to start working on the always growing pile of paperwork. For every moment of excitement the job held, it gave him 20 minutes of drudgery. As he reached for the top file, a text came in. It was from Nick. Nick, need to see you now. Alex's stomach lurched. Was he in trouble? He thought over the events of the day and couldn't think of anything he'd done wrong. He picked up his coffee and headed over to the captain's office. Nick waved him in. At least he didn't look upset. Maybe Alex had jumped to the wrong conclusion. He stepped inside and closed the door. What's going on? Nick gestured to the chair on the other side of his desk. Alex took the seat and sipped on the mocha.
Long night?
Nick glanced at Alex's drink. Alex yawned.
The twins have colds, so they were up all night. Zoe tried to take care of them without waking me, but I couldn't let her stay up all night.
Nick nodded.
I hope they feel better soon. Thanks. So why did you call me in here?
He leaned back in his chair.
Do you have a niece I don't know about?
Alex choked on the mocha.
What? No. Not unless Macy's been holding out on me. Why?
Nick tapped on his desk.
There's a 12-year-old girl in a hospital in Spokane who claims you're her uncle.
Alex gave him a double take.
What's her name?
Nobody knows.
The social workers haven't been able to get anything from her other than your name. She can't remember what happened to her or even who she is, but she thinks you're her uncle. She named you specifically.
Alex put his coffee cup on the desk.
I don't know why. Did she see my name on the news recently? I had that interview about the car crash. Maybe that's the only thing she can remember and somehow thinks I'm her uncle?
Nick turned his computer monitor toward Alex.
This is what she looks like. Do you know her?
He recoiled at the picture. The girl looked like she'd been severely beaten, and he definitely didn't recognize her.
Nothing?
Nick frowned. Alex shook his head, but scooted closer and studied the girl's features. There actually was something familiar about her.
Do you know her?
Alex squinted and tried to think of how he might have known the girl from Spokane. A friend of Ariana's? She looked to be about the same age, or someone he met on the job, or... Alex froze. He did know her.
What?
Nick leaned forward.
Who is she?
Alex studied the image, his stomach tightening before turning to his friend.
I'm not her uncle, but her cousin. Well, her mom is my cousin. I stayed with her family for a while when she was little.
Then a thought struck him like a slap to the face.
She called me Uncle Alex when I was there. I was messed up and surly, but she wasn't put off by any of it. The kid adored me for some crazy reason.
Nick's eyes grew wider by the moment.
What's her name? Who are her parents? Ayla Stevens. Her parents are Robin and Brock Stevens. Robin's my cousin. Where are they? Are they okay? They aren't with her?
Alex's heart thundered. Nick shook his head. I need you to write down all of their names to make sure we have the right spellings. I'm going to call Sergeant Hoffman so he can start looking into it immediately. Alex wrote the names and handed the paper to Nick.
I'm calling my parents. Maybe they know something.
He fumbled his way over to the couch and called his dad.
Hey, Alex, I'm on the phone with my agent. Can I call you back? Dad, this is important. Do you know where Robin and Brock are?
Robin and Brock? Why? Something wrong?
Yes, Ayla's in the hospital and nobody knows where her family is.
Let me call around and I'll let you know what I find out. After his dad ended the call, Alex remembered he had numbers for both Robin and Brock in his contact list. He called both numbers and, as expected, got voicemails. He told them both to call him back, but doubted they would. If their daughter was in the hospital and they were nowhere to be found, that could only mean something was wrong. Possibly deadly wrong. He called a few more cousins, but nobody had heard from the family or had any clue that something could be amiss. Nick waved him over to the desk.
Did you find anything?
Alex shook his head, his mind spinning and his pulse drumming in his ears.
Nobody's heard anything, but my relatives are calling others.
Officers are heading to their house now to assess the situation. Alex's stomach lurched. What were they going to find there?
There's something else you should know.
It gets worse? Alex clenched his fists.
I don't know about worse, but the hospital is close to discharging Ayla. If she doesn't go to a family member, they will have to enter her into the foster care system. And I'm the only person she can remember.
Nick nodded.
If she spends time with you, it might help jog her memory. Are you willing to take her? After her family took me in? Of course. Not to mention all it looks like she's been through. I can't make her go through more by going to strangers.
Okay, good. I'll call over to Spokane and get the details. Then we can head over.
We're going there?
They won't be flying her over. It's a 4-hour drive, if I remember correctly. You'd better call Zoe and fill her in.
And make sure she's okay with this.
Alex rose and pulled out his phone.
Wait just a minute before calling.
Sure thing. For privacy from the rest of the squad, Alex called her while he was still in Nick's office, then filled her in on everything he knew.
Is it okay with you if we take Ayla in? Nick and I would drive over there to get her, and we'd be back pretty late. After 8 or 9. You going to be okay with the twins that long?
Do what you need to for that poor girl, Alex. We can either pull our couch into a bed, or I'm sure my parents will let her stay in the guest room upstairs.
My parents might be willing to help out, too. I'll have to talk with them. My dad's calling around right now to see if anyone knows where her parents are.
I love that you want to help her. Do what you need to. We'll make it work. I'll let my parents know what's going on.
Thanks, so. I'm not sure why I'm the only one she remembers, but I want to be there for her.
Xander just started crying. I'll call you later. Love you.
You too.
He ended the call and went over to Nick's desk.
It's a go.
Nick set his phone down.
Glad to hear it. I just got word that the girl's house has been empty for a while. Newspapers are strewn around their yard and the mail is falling out of the mailbox.
Alex's stomach nodded.
That can't be good. We'd better leave.
We'll take my car. I've got one thing to do real quick, then I'll meet you in the lot.
Okay.
Alex picked up his coffee, his mind now too worried to drink any more of it. What had his cousin been through? And were her parents still in danger? Hesitate. Alex's stomach rumbled. Nick chuckled and glanced over at him.
Maybe we should stop off for some dinner. It's possible the traffic will
Sample complete. Ready to continue?